reading today is from the Gospel of John, chapter 1, starting with verses 1 through 5. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being. In him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. Now John chapter 1, verse 10 through 14. He was in the world, and the Word came into being through him, yet the world did not know him. He came to what was his own, and his own people did not accept him. But all who received him, who believe in his name, he gave power to become children of God, who were born not of blood, or of with the flesh, or of the will of man, but of God. And the Word became flesh and lived among us, and we have seen his glory, the glory as of a parent's only child, full of grace and truth. May God add a blessing to the reading and hearing of God's word today.
And so this morning, as you can see, what I want to talk to you about on this last Sunday of 2019, which again, where did the time go? What I want to begin by asking you is if you are familiar with who said that we'll leave the light on for you. It's who? Motel 6, right? There it is right there, Motel 6. In fact, it would be a man named Tom Baudet, and we'll leave what? The light on for you. The problem is, guess what? Motel 6 doesn't leave the light on for you. In fact, Motel 6 does very little for you. They don't put a mint on your pillow. They don't turn down your sheets. They don't offer you breakfast. What they do offer you is you get to save some money, right? By staying in Motel 6. But seriously, they don't leave the light on because leaving the light on will cost too much in all their rooms. So again, it's a saying, it's something that's about coziness and warmth and welcoming you in. And so today I want to talk about that thing about the light and what does it mean about light. It's been a while. I can't tell the last time that someone has come up to me and asked me for a light. I may not hang out in the same places I used to hang out in, but it's been a long time since someone looked at me and said, hey, you got what? A light? And of course, what usually was meant by that is somebody wanted you to what? Right? Have you got a light? Remember back when I was a teenager also, these were popular at concerts, right? While performers were performing, at some point they'd ask you to take out your light, your lighter, and what? And light it. The problem is that the longer you have a lighter lit, the what? The hotter it gets. Nowadays, of course, I suppose when someone says, do you have a light? What they could be asking is if you have a light. Because now, we all have lights. And so again, see, so often we sort of take for granted light. I mean, think about it. For us, light is no big deal, right? Because light is everywhere. I remember in cars, I don't know if you remember these in cars. Remember this? When it used to be what? A cigarette lighter? Now it's what? It's a charging station, right? I remember as a kid, I even pushed that thing in one time and took it out, and whoo, you talk about hot. It's like with my children too, when I tell them to roll the window down. Roll it down? What do you mean roll the window down? Because we used to what? Right? And now you just So again, there are things that changed about lights and lighters, but we, again, have this convenience. All we have to do is flip a switch if we paid the bill. That's another thing. I used to think when I was a kid that lights were free, right? I didn't know people paid light bills. Light is free. Light's for everybody. Even my own kids now, I'm always going around and doing what? Turning lights off. And telling them to turn the light off when you leave the room, because why? Someone's got to what? Pay the bill. What's the other thing we used to say too, when you come in from the cold, you leave the door open? Were you what? Born in a barn? Of course, Jesus, if he was asked that, right? But again, it's this understanding about light. There's a show I watch, it's on History Channel, and it's called Alone. I don't know if everybody's seen it before. It's kind of like Survivor, except being with a group of people, you're all by yourself. And then Alone, they drop people off, usually about, I don't know, Michelle, maybe 10 contestants, and they drop them off in these very rugged conditions, often up by the Arctic North, and they drop them off miles apart. And the whole thing is who could survive the longest alone. And each contestant is allowed to bring a certain number of items with them. And this one season, one guy decided that he was not going to bring the one thing everybody brings, and that is a flint stone, a flint lighter that you use to strike and get a spark to what? Start a fire. He decided, I'm going to do it the old-fashioned way and take sticks and rub them together as hard as I could to get the friction to build up, to get a spark and to catch it. And the first time he tried to make a fire, it took him 7 hours. 7 hours to start a fire. And he realized he made a big mistake. Because once he got the fire started, then it was his job to keep the what? Fire burning. He was consumed with not letting that fire burn out. So he'd be up night and day tending this fire. But after a few days, you can imagine, exhaustion set in, and he fell asleep. And guess what happened? The fire went out. So what happens to us in life when the light goes out? What happens to us in life when we, like a light bulb, burn out? When we don't have a light that's burning, a light that's illuminating, a light to lead and guide the way. And that's what today's gospel lesson is for us. And actually, today is the Christmas story again. Some of you were here on Christmas Eve when we read from Luke. And in Luke's gospel is all this talk of shepherds and angels and a manger in Bethlehem. That is in Luke. In Matthew, Mark, and John, there's no birth story. In fact, I have to let you in a little secret. There was some controversy around Jesus. Because when Jesus showed up on the scene and started preaching and teaching and healing people, they saw the great things he was doing. Some said he's the Messiah. And others said he can't be the Messiah because he's from a town called Nazareth. He was Jesus of Nazareth. And they said the Messiah is to be born in Bethlehem. In fact, even in John's gospel, that comes out. And so Luke is the one that says, guess what? He was born in Bethlehem. But the others don't mention that. The others don't go into such detail. And John begins his story in such a profound way. In fact, if you look here, go down please, slide. Now, I know this is probably a seeing eye test for you right now. But what I want to demonstrate, if I could, if you look at the top left, you see John 1, and then about halfway down the screen, on the left-hand side, you see Genesis 1. You see that? And what I wanted to show you is how John 1 actually begins in the same way, the Gospel of John begins the same way as Genesis begins, with the same language of in the beginning. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. That's John. Genesis, the first book in the Old Testament, in the beginning when God created the heavens and the earth was a formless void, the darkness covered the face of the deep. But both begin with this understanding, in the beginning. And what John's saying is, I don't need to go to Bethlehem to tell you about Jesus. I'm going to go even before Bethlehem, because Jesus has always been as God has always been. Jesus is God in the flesh, God among us and with us, who has been from beginning to end. And where Genesis begins in chapter 1, that on that first day, that first moment, the first thing that God made is God said, let there be what? Light. John 1 says, well, then let me tell you a little more about this light. Because this light has a name. And really, again, for us, light is something that we use in order to see. And there's natural sources of light. What are some natural sources of light? Right now, what? The sun. And at night, the moon and the stars. Also, natural source of light is fire. Lightning bugs. Even some fish that give off a glow. Of course, we're more used to what is the artificial types of light, fluorescent, incandescent, and light source here. And so light, again, is what we see. When we hear light, we think of something that allows us to see. But what is talked about in Genesis, John, is something more. Light is not just something that gives you the ability to see. Light is what gives you the ability to live. Light is life. And John even says that there where he says to him in verse 4 of Jesus, in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. And so again, what it is for us to know today is that life is light. But the reality is, as John says, that as well as there's light, there's also the reality that there is also night. There's darkness. There's times in life when we go through periods of darkness, of despair, of depression. In fact, today is December what? 29th. So we're about 8-9 days in the winter. You ever heard of a seasonal affective disorder? Right? And what causes seasonal affective disorder is the lack of light. Because the days are shorter, times of light, and whether you know it or not, we respond to light, especially sunlight. And seasonal affective disorder affects us mentally, spiritually, emotionally. That's why even people who live in the state of Washington that has some of the most overcast days in the country, there's higher rates of depression in Washington than other places in the country because of what happens to us when there isn't light, when there's times we go through a night time of life. And we all go through those times of life when night seems to last forever. You ever had a restless night when you just can't sleep? And you can't sleep because why? There's just so much, right? So much on your mind, so much on your heart, so much you're carrying. And doesn't it seem like that night just lasts forever? And you feel like you've been laying there for 3 hours, and you look at the clock again, and it's been 3 minutes, and you wonder, when will this night, what, ever end? And so night comes to all of us. But I want you just to hear what John reminds us today. What John says to us, though, is that the light still, though, shines in the darkness. At night, the light is absent, but the light is present. And the light dispels or pushes out the darkness. The light is present in the nighttime. And what I love there, that says how the light wins, that the darkness, that night does not overcome it. Although sometimes it may feel like it will. And there's times, again, I know I've been burned out. And one of the things I've tried to learn as a pastor, been doing this for 21 years, A lot of times, like as a parent perhaps, or a spouse, we carry a lot. You know, when people come to you with their issues, and I love people, I love all of you. So when you struggle, guess what? I struggle. That's what we do together. When you hurt, I hurt. When we're together in this. And so what happens to us, though, is sometimes it can feel like it's just too much. And you burn out. And over my years of ministry, one thing I've tried to learn is how to take care of myself and to practice self-care and set aside time for you, because there are times that if you don't take care of you, guess what? No one else will. And sometimes they'll get mad at you for self-care, but guess what? They'll get over it because you have to take care of you and set up that time for you to let your light regather its strength, to let your light regain its power, regain what it needs. And so sometimes that self-care happens through prayer, meditation, going to the spa, taking a day off, doing it for you. But also, sometimes the other thing I've learned is when my light is low, what I need is your light. I need your light to shine because my light's out. That's why I like to hang out with folks in church who have some light shining, so their light can help me when my light is dimming. As my son shared up here, and we went through a lot of, Zachary for years has been asking for a Nerf gun. And we don't like guns. We talk to our kids about guns. I always say to them, if you see a gun, run away. Don't be near a gun and this and that. But Zach's begging us, so finally we said, okay, we'll get him a Nerf gun. But there's no way in heaven or anywhere else that we're going to give Zach a gun and not give us a gun. Fair is fair. And so we got 4 Nerf guns on Christmas morning. So there was much carnage, little foam bullets all over the house. And my son is the kind that he's shooting, and when he's out of bullets, he's like, cease fire, cease fire. I'm out of bullets, even though if you're out, he just continues to come at you. So Christmas afternoon, Michelle was making some cornbread in the oven for our dinner, and she happened to open the oven to look and see if the cornbread was ready, and all of a sudden, pew! A Nerf bullet got shot in the oven. Now, Zach says it was an accident, but he happened to be standing there just like this. And so the bullet went in the oven and went behind the tray all the way down into the broiler. And so Michelle had to pull out the broiler, and we had to turn off the oven, and then we looked and we're trying to see where is that bullet. And so sure enough, took out my light, and we looked down there, and we saw this Nerf bullet all the way back at the very back of the broiler. And we were afraid it could either catch fire or just start to smoke. We couldn't, but the cornbread wasn't ready. So we had more baking to do. So we had this, so I had the light on the foam bullet, and I had these long tongs in my hands because the oven was still hot, and I'm trying to reach back there, and I found that I couldn't do it from this angle. I actually had to lay on my back to stretch my right arm in as far as I could to get it. But the problem was I couldn't reach and hold the light at the same time. And so Michelle came over, and we both laid down by the oven because we have the greatest Christmases now. And we laid down by the oven and took both kids to get us up from the oven. But she held the light, and I was able to see the bullet and grab it and bring it out. But see, sometimes in life, it's not going to be your light that shines. It'll be a light of somebody else to shine for you to see. And that's the gift of community that we have for each other. That's the light that shines, the light of Christ, Jesus' light that shines, even in the times of night. And remember, the night, the darkness, does not win, but life and light always do. But I want to do one more thing before I end today, because this is, again, the last Sunday of this year. I was thinking about this word light this week for this sermon today, this time for us to be together. And there's actually, the word we have for light can be used in a different connotation. Light can mean illumination. Light can mean making things visible, making things seen. But we also use the word light for something that doesn't weigh that much. You know, if you do a small load of laundry, you do a what? Light load, right? And so light for us can mean different things. Now in Greek, there's two different words. The word is phonos, which has where we get photograph from and the like, is the light of this. But there's another word that Jesus used at another time that really struck me that I think is important for me and for you today. That's the word elephron. And elephron means this. Go down the slide, please, Chantal. It's this word. When Jesus said, come to me. See, this is the light of God talking to us. This is God speaking to us. Come to me, all you that are weary and are carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, from gentle and humble in heart, and you'll find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is what? Light. That's that other word for light, elephron in Greek. That's the other place where light is important for us today, I do believe. Now, often we hear yoke. We'll think of this yoke. Go down a slide, please. Right? The yolk of an egg. I don't know, who likes their eggs over easy? Nope. Scrambled, omelets. Anyone over easy? All right, we got a few over easy. Just the dip, the toast, or bacon, that's mine too. But Jesus isn't talking about eggs, right? Jesus is talking about this. The yoke that Jesus talked about, right, is a yoke that oxen shared in Jesus' time, the farmhands, the animals that worked the field. And what he was trying to say to us is if you look, that yokes are always come side by side. And the yoke is an instrument of guidance that helps to guide where we are to go. And the beauty of the yoke is it's not just one person, but it's shared. It's not just one animal on its own, but it's shared with each other. So you're not pulling alone anymore. You're not walking alone. You're not having to do alone, but now it's shared, it's equal, and somebody else is beside you that can walk with you, that can show you and guide you. And that's what Jesus is saying to us. That's what the light of God says to us when he says about, take my burden, it's light. Take my grace and light. And you can move forward easier when it's light. Because we're about to enter in a new year. And I know a lot of us are carrying things that we've carried for a while that we don't need to carry anymore. And things that weigh us down and burdens that are heavy. And, especially what stress can do to you and I. What stress does to us mentally and physically and spiritually. And what stress does to our health overall. And there's things that we're carrying today. There's things I'm carrying. Pain and hurt and failures from 2019 that guess what? They should stay in 2019. Because if you try to bring them back into 2020, guess what? You're going to keep feeling it way down and beating you down physically, mentally, and spiritually. We drove back from New York yesterday, went up to Brooklyn, and driving back, we hit massive traffic at Delaware and New Jersey border at the bridge. You know exactly what I'm talking about, saying as a truck driver, right? We had traffic all the way, I'm not kidding you, bumper to bumper, all the way from New Jersey, Delaware, down to the Beltway in 95. The whole way. And can I just tell you, people don't know how to drive. And you talk about impatient and people cutting off. And I mean, if everybody just moved at a decent speed, we'd be all right. But there's always somebody that has to get that little bit ahead and cut someone else off. They hit their brake and someone else. And I'm telling you, it was so much. We finally got home. And I said to the kids, and I said, you got to help Mom and I carry the bags in. We can unload this ourselves. And I carried one bag, and I went in the house, and I went in the TV room, and we have a lazy boy there, and I just sat down in that lazy boy. And then my daughter walked in. Aren't you going to help? I said, so now let me tell you something. When you start to drive, you'll know. But I am so stressed out right now because I have my muscles and because I was trying to what? Get through traffic. Well, guess what? In 2019, Allah's been just trying to get through some stuff and get through some mess. And we're stressed out and we're tired. But the problem is we haven't learned to let it go and lighten up. And that's what Jesus says, to come to me, for my burden is light. And so what I want to just do today for our prayer time, we're going to move it from later to now. And I invite those who want to come forward, just for a moment, just to pray and to anoint with oil. And a moment for you today to open yourself up, to let go. Let God's light shine, not just on you, but let God's light shine in you today. And lighten the load. Let the light make it lighter for you as we learn to trust God in all things as God has come to us through Jesus. And so for those who wish to come forward, I would invite you to do so now.